granddaughter turned 6 on a Tuesday, and I found out about her birthday party from a photo album somebody tagged me in by accident. There she was, my Lily Rose, blowing out candles on a cake shaped like a castle in a backyard I had never seen, surrounded by faces I didn't recognize. My son stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder, smiling for the camera. My daughter-in-law had captioned it, "Surrounded by the people who matter most." I counted the guests. 43. I was not one of them. 1 week later, my daughter-in-law called me breathless, and the first words out of her mouth were, "The mortgage payment didn't go through. Did you send it or not? The bank is calling." And I held the phone against my ear. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. I said, "Didn't I tell you? But before I tell you how I watched my own son lose the house I never should have bought him, do me a favor and tap that like button. Subscribe if you believe a man's love has a limit, and that limit is the moment his own blood pretends he doesn't exist. And leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is, because some nights it gets quiet in this old house, and it helps to know somebody's out there listening. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday, and the album, and the cake I never got to see in person. My name is Walter Quill. I am 68 years old, and I have spent 41 of those years up to my elbows in engine grease and transmission fluid. I owned 3 auto shops in and around Dayton, Ohio, before I sold the last one, and my hands look like a map of every busted knuckle and burn scar I ever earned. People look at me and they see an old man in a Carhartt jacket who probably reads the paper and yells at squirrels. They don't see much else, and that's fine by me. I never had the patience for show. My son, Roman, was never like me. Roman liked the smell of money more than the smell of work. His wife, Sloane, and I'll say her name plain because she earned it. Sloane liked the appearance of money even more. The two of them lived in a 4-bedroom colonial out in a development called Cedar Hollow Estates. The kind of place with a gate and a man in a little booth who waves you through. The house cost $640,000. I know that number the way I know my own birthday because I'm the one who co-signed the loan, and every month the payment came out of an account I funded. They told their friends Roman was in development, and Sloane ran a lifestyle brand, which as far as I could ever tell meant she took pictures of herself holding coffee and complained when the comments slowed down. The truth was simpler. My retirement savings paid their mortgage. My money kept the lights on, kept the leased Audi in the driveway, kept my granddaughter in a private kindergarten that cost more per year than my first house cost outright. They thought I didn't know all of it. They thought I was just the old man who wrote the checks. It was a Sunday dinner, the last Sunday in April, when I asked the question that started all of this. I'd driven the 40 minutes out to Cedar Hollow because Roman had called and said, "Lily Rose, Mr. Grandpa, and I am a fool for that little girl." So I went. Sloane had made some kind of chicken that tasted like it had never met salt, and we were all sitting around their long glass table when I cleared my throat. "So," I said, "Lily Rose turns 6 next week. I was thinking I'd take her to the science center downtown, the one with the dinosaur bones. Make a whole day of it. When's the party? I want to bring my brother Dale up from Kentucky. He hasn't seen her since she was in diapers." The table went quiet. Roman looked at his plate. Sloane looked at her phone, then set it down very slowly, like she was deciding something. "Oh, Walt," she said. She only ever called me Dad when she needed something. The party already happened. Tuesday. It was just a little thing. I felt the floor tilt. Tuesday was 3 days ago. It was very small, she said. Just close friends. Family that's local. You know how it is. The logistics get complicated, and honestly, the theme was very specific. A whole aesthetic. We didn't think it was your kind of thing. It was her birthday, I said. I'm her grandfather. Roman finally looked up. Dad, it's not a big deal. We're doing a separate thing with you later. Something more low-key. Burgers, maybe. Burgers. Later. While 43 people I'd never met ate castle cake in a backyard I paid for, I looked at my son. This man I taught to ride a bike. This boy whose orthodontist I paid off in monthly installments while I drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it. And I looked at Sloane, and I saw it then. On her wrist, a tennis bracelet, diamonds all the way around, catching the light from their oversized chandelier. I knew that bracelet. Roman had come to me 4 months earlier, crying almost, saying he wanted to do something special for Sloane's birthday, that their marriage was under strain, that this would fix it. I wrote him a check for $18,000. I sat there looking at $18,000 of my money on the wrist of a woman who had just told me I wasn't her kind of thing. Something in my chest went very still and very cold. It wasn't grief. I'd had grief before when my wife passed, and this was different. This was the sensation a man gets when he finally diagnoses the knock in an engine he's been ignoring for months. The clarity of knowing exactly what's broken and exactly what it's going to cost to fix. I set down my fork. "I'm not very hungry," I said. "Don't be dramatic, Walt," Sloane said, picking up her phone again. "It's a party. We'll send you pictures." I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. Lily Rose, who'd been quiet in front of a tablet the whole meal, looked up at me. "Are you leaving, Grandpa?" That one almost broke me. I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "Grandpa's got to get going, baby. You be good." And I walked to the door and I did not slam it. I closed it soft. That's a thing my own father taught me. You can tell everything about a man by whether he slams the door or closes it quiet. The quiet ones are the ones you watch out for. I drove the 40 minutes home in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad, not really. I felt like a man doing inventory, and somewhere around the exit from my own neighborhood, the old neighborhood, the one with the cracked sidewalks and the porch lights, I started doing the math. Not the math of feelings. The math of money. Because here is what Roman and Sloane never bothered to learn about me. They knew I'd owned auto shops. They figured I'd sold them, salted away a decent pension, and that was the well they kept drawing from. What they never asked, never once in all those years of taking, was where a man who fixes transmissions gets the money to co-sign a $600,000 house and write $18,000 checks for jewelry without blinking. The answer is that I never spent a dime I didn't have to. For 40 years, while other men bought boats, I bought property. Little stuff at first. A duplex here. A strip of commercial frontage on a road everybody said would never develop. Then it developed. I bought the building my second shop rented, then the buildings on either side. When the crash came in, '08, everybody was running scared. I was the man at the auction with cash. By the time I sold my last shop, I wasn't a mechanic with a pension. I was a man who owned 11 properties across 2 counties, free and clear, worth a number I don't say out loud because it embarrasses me. And one of those properties, held under a company called Quill Holdings LLC, was the lot and the construction loan paper on a development called Cedar Hollow Estates. I didn't just co-sign my son's mortgage, I held the note. The bank that kept calling Sloane was a servicing company that worked for me. When I got home that night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee going cold, and I called the one person who knew the whole picture. Her name is Renata Okafor. She's been my attorney for 22 years, and she answered on the second ring even though it was nearly 10 at night. "Walt, everything all right?" "Renata," I said, "I need you to pull the file on the Cedar Hollow note. The one Roman's in." A pause. "All right, what am I looking for? Tell me where we stand on default provisions." Another pause, longer this time. "Walt, are you about to do what I think you're about to do?" I looked out my kitchen window at the dark backyard. The same backyard where I taught Roman to throw a baseball 35 years ago. "I'm done paying," I said. "Stop the transfers. All of them. And start putting together everything we'd need to call the note if a borrower stopped paying." "That's your son." "No," I said. "That's a delinquent borrower. I'll let you know when I figure out the difference." 3 days passed, and I didn't hear a word from either of them. That silence told me everything. They weren't worried. Why would they be? It was the end of the month, sure, but the money always came. The money was a law of nature to them, like gravity, like the sun. I spent those 3 days at the diner I've gone to every morning for 30 years, a place called The Spoke on the East Side, where the coffee is bad and the waitress, a young woman named Coraline working her way through nursing school, calls me on, and never once asked me for anything but a tip. I sat in my booth and I read the paper and I waited. On the first of the month, my phone rang. Sloan. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. Walt? Walt, finally. Listen, the auto pay didn't go through on the house. The mortgage, it's showing past due, and there's a late notice, and the servicing company is being absolutely insane about it. They keep emailing. Did you forget to fund the account or what? It's $6,200. You need to push it through today. I took a slow sip of my coffee. $6,200 is a lot of money, Sloan. A sharp exhale. I know how much it is. That's why I'm calling you. The portal won't let me log a payment without it clearing, and Roman's capital is all tied up in the development right now, so? There it was. The development that didn't exist, the capital that was my capital, the entrepreneur who'd never in his life met a payroll. I'll look into it, I said. But before I go, I've been thinking about Lily Rose's party. Since I missed it, I'd love to see some pictures. Maybe one of her with the cake. You know, I never got to see the cake. The silence on the line went tight as a guitar string. I could practically hear her calculating. Oh, she said, her voice gone sweet and false. We actually didn't take many photos. It was kind of a no-phones thing. We wanted everyone present, you know, in the moment. So there's really not much to send. No phones. A woman whose entire income depended on her phone throwing a no-phone party. I almost laughed. Of course, I said. In the moment. I understand. Let me check the account, Sloan. I'll call you back. Today, Walt. I'll call you back. Today, Walt. It has to be today. And she hung up. No goodbye. No thank you. Just the click. I set the phone face down on the table. Coraline came by with the pot. Refill, hon. Coraline said, you young people know your way around the internet. There's somebody posted pictures online, but I'm not friends with them. Can I still see those pictures? She slid into the booth across from me, grateful, I think, for a minute off her feet. Depends if they're public. What's the name? I'll find them. I gave her Sloane's name. Sloane, who branded herself as a public figure, who would no sooner make her account private than she'd wear last season's boots. Coraline's thumbs flew. Then she stopped, and she turned the phone around to face me. This her? She just had a kid's birthday party. I put on my reading glasses, and there it was. Not a little thing. Not a small gathering. A spread. A backyard transformed into something out of a magazine, with a balloon arch and a custom castle cake and a hired entertainer dressed as a fairy tale prince, and dozens of people in coordinated pastel outfits holding champagne flutes while children ran on a rented bounce castle. There were professional photos. Drone footage even, little aerial video Sloane had posted with sparkle effects on it. And then I scrolled, and I found one that stopped my heart. It was a photo of Lily Rose holding a sign that said in a child's careful printing, "Me family." And gathered around her in the photo were Roman, Sloane, Sloane's parents, Sloane's sister, and a man I recognized as Sloane's father's golfing buddy. My family, and not one wrinkle of me anywhere in it. I handed the phone back to Coraline. My hand was steady. I was almost surprised by how steady. You all right, hon? She asked. You went pale. I'm fine, I said. I left her a $40 tip on $11 tab, because that girl had more decency in her tired feet than my son had in his whole body. and I walked out to my truck. I sat in the cab and I opened my banking app and I looked at the saved transfer. Roman Quill. 6,200. My thumb hovered over it. It would have been so easy. I'd done it 100 times. It was a reflex by now, like signaling a turn. But I thought about that sign. My family. And I thought, all right, son. If I'm not your family, then I'm not your bank either. I closed the app. I didn't send a dime. For the first time in my adult life, I was not going to be the thing that caught them when they fell. I was going to be the ground. 2 days after that, I made a mistake. I'll admit it. My heart got ahead of my head. I drove out to Cedar Hollow, and I told myself it was to check the property, inspect the siding, look at the grading on the back lot. But the truth is, I wanted a reason to forgive them. A father's heart is the most stubborn machine ever built. It keeps running on fumes long after every gauge reads empty. I had a key, of course. I held the note. I went up to the front door and my key didn't fit. They'd changed the locks. Put in one of those keypad systems, a glowing thing where the deadbolt used to be. They'd spent good money to lock out the man who paid for the walls. I stood there feeling like a fool, and that's when I heard it through the door, which they'd left cracked to let in the spring air. Laughter. Sloane's voice, high and bright. You should have seen his face, she was saying. When I told him the party already happened, he looked like a kicked dog. It was honestly kind of sad. Another woman's voice. But aren't you worried he'll get upset? He pays for everything, doesn't he? And then my son, Roman, laughing, easy light. Dad? Nah. He's a soft touch. All I've got to do is call him in a couple days, talk about how stressed I am. Maybe let my voice crack a little. He loves playing the hero. He'll have the money in the account before I finish the sentence. The old man can't help himself. He needs us more than we need him. I won't pretend that didn't go through me like a blade. I leaned my forehead against the door for a second, and I closed my eyes. And then the strangest thing happened. The hurt didn't grow. It hardened. It set up like concrete. The part of me that wanted to be loved by these people just stopped. And what was left standing was the man who used to walk into a negotiation and walk out owning the building. I put my useless key back in my pocket. I didn't knock. I didn't say a word. I straightened my jacket, and I walked back to my truck, and I checked my watch. 2 in the afternoon. Renata would still be in her office. I drove downtown to the building on 3rd Street, the glass one with my company's name nowhere on it but my money holding up every floor. The young man in the elevator looked at my Carhartt jacket and my work boots and pressed himself into the corner like I might be carrying something contagious. He had no idea he was riding in a building I owned. Renata was waiting. She'd cleared her afternoon when I texted. She had the file open on her desk. Talk to me, she said. Stop the autopay, I said. Already done. It's been stopped since last week like you asked. As of yesterday, the loan is officially in default. The grace period closed at midnight. Good. Initiate the standard process. Treat it like any other delinquent note in the portfolio. Renata took off her glasses. Walt. The standard process on a defaulted residential note is a notice of default, then a demand for full payment. Then we file for foreclosure. That last part puts your son and your granddaughter out of a house. I know what it does, I said. I wrote half those provisions myself. They'll figure out it's you. Quill Holdings, Walt. The name's right on the paper. No, I said. Roman has never once read a contract in his life. He thinks Quill is a common name. He's never asked me a single question about my business in 30 years. He just holds out his hand. He won't make the connection until I want him to. She was quiet a long moment. Is this punishment, or is it a lesson? I thought about that honestly. Because Renata's the kind of person who deserves an honest answer. I don't know yet, I said. I want to find out who he really is when the safety net's gone. If he's a man, he'll get a job. He'll downsize. He'll call and apologize. And if he's not, I stopped. If he's not, she said, then he'll have to build himself up from the bottom, same as I did. And there's no shame in the bottom. The only shame is in pretending you were never there. She picked up her pen. I'll have the notice posted tomorrow. 3 days to cure, then we file. Make the print big, I said. I don't want them missing the details. I'd love to tell you the next part was clean. It wasn't. Desperation never is. When you pull the floor out from under people who never built anything, they don't fall gracefully. They claw. The notice went on their door, and Sloane called me 11 times in a row. And when I finally answered, I made my voice old and confused, like I'd just woken from a nap. She screamed about the servicing company, about a delinquency, about how the bank was harassing them. I told her, gentle as you please, that I was sorry, but I was a little short this month myself, that my own accounts had gotten tight, that maybe Roman, being the successful developer he was, could cover it just this once. The silence on her end was the silence of a woman watching the only thing she'd ever bet on come up empty. They scraped it together that month. Sloane sold the diamond bracelet, the $18,000 bracelet, to a consignment place on 5th for $4,000 cash. Roman called every friend who'd raised a glass at that party, and every one of them suddenly had cash flow problems of their own. Funny how that works. People who'll drink your champagne won't lend you $1. They paid the past due amount with about an hour to spare, and they thought they'd won. They thought I'd buy them another bracelet to sell. I had no such intention. The next month came, and there was no money. And this time when Roman called, he came at me with the cruelest play in the book. He told me he was in the hospital. Chest pains. The doctors were saying it was his heart, a defect they'd missed, and he needed $40,000 for a procedure because the insurance had lapsed, of course, because of the money troubles I'd caused. He cried on the phone. My boy, my Roman, cried and said he didn't want to die, and every cell in my body that was still a father stood up and got ready to run to the bank. But Renata was in my kitchen at the time, going over the foreclosure timeline, and she'd been getting reports from a man I quietly put on retainer to keep an eye on things. And while Roman wept in my ear about his failing heart, Renata slid her tablet across my table. It was a photograph, time-stamped, that morning. Roman, in a white robe, holding a green drink with a little umbrella in it, laughing on a lounge chair at a resort spa out by the lake. The kind of place that charges $300 a night. I held the phone, and I listened to my son fake his own death for $40,000, and the last thing in me that was soft went hard and stayed that way. I understand, son, I said, calm as still water. Let me see what I can do. Most of my money's tied up, but I've got the old truck. Fella's been after it for years. Offered me $45 for it. I'll sell it. Take about 2 weeks to get you the cash. Can you hold on 2 weeks? The change in his voice was instant. The dying man got his strength back real quick. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I think I can. I'll tell the doctors the money's coming. 2 weeks. You promise, Dad? I promise, I said. I'll send you exactly what you deserve. I hung up. I looked at Renata. He's at a spa, I said. He's getting a facial while he tells me his heart's giving out. He showed you who he is, she said softly. Now believe him. I do, I said. Finally, I do. Get the paperwork ready. In 2 weeks, they'll be waiting for a check. I want them to get something else instead. I told her to move the foreclosure to its final stage and to put the development the whole Cedar Hollow note up for sale to an investment group that had been sniffing around for a year. Let them deal with a new owner. Something told me the new owner wouldn't be near as patient as the old fool who raised the borrower. The 2 weeks ran out and the check never came, because there was no truck for sale and there was never going to be a dime. And while Roman and Sloane sat in that house refreshing a bank balance that would never move, a thick envelope came under their door, and this one had red letters across the top. Notice of foreclosure. Demand for possession. What they did next, I only know because of the man I had watching. They didn't get jobs. They didn't pack. Sloane, God help her, decided the way out of a hole was to dig faster. She convinced Roman to throw one more party, an investor showcase. She called it right there in the house they were about to lose. Black tie. Champagne. Roman would pitch his non-existent development to actual people with actual money, raise a seed round, and pay everything off. They maxed their last open credit card on caterers and a string quartet. They invited everyone but me. Bad energy, Sloane called me. The past. The night of their party, I put on a charcoal suit I'd had tailored years ago for occasions I rarely attended. I traded my work boots for shoes that cost more than Coraline made in a month. Though I'd never tell her that. I had Renata with me, and two large men from a security firm and the property manager who answered to me. We took the elevator up. Not the elevator up, should say, but I went in the front gate that the man in the booth waved me through, because the man in the booth knew exactly who signed his checks. I walked into my son's foyer in the middle of his fake party, and the room went quiet the way a shop goes quiet when the wrong man walks in. Sloane saw me and her face came apart. She grabbed a microphone she'd been using to make toast and shrieked into it for security to remove me, and the property manager stepped up beside me and took the microphone gentle as you please and told the 40 bewildered guests in their black tie that the event was over, that the home was being repossessed for non-payment, and that the actual owner of the property was standing right here. Then he said my name. Walter Quill, chairman of Quill Holdings. I watched it land on my son's face. I watched him understand, all at once, that the faceless company on the foreclosure paper, the bank that kept calling, the note on the house he'd been told was a coincidence of a common last name, it was me. It had always been me. The man he called a soft touch, the man he hid from his daughter's birthday, the man whose hands were too rough to be seen at the Ritz of a suburban backyard. The investors left like the building was on fire. The friends evaporated. And then it was just the three of us in the wreckage. The way it always should have come down to. Roman dropped to his knees on the marble I'd paid for and grabbed at my sleeve and begged, "Dad, please, just fix it. Just transfer it. I'll pay you back, I swear. Just send the money." Even then, even on his knees with everything gone, he didn't ask me to forgive him. He asked me to pay. I looked down at my son. I pulled my arm free, gentle. "You asked me a question," I said. "On the phone. You asked if I'd transferred the money." He stared up at me. "Didn't I tell you?" I said. "I only pay for my family. And at your daughter's birthday, you put up a sign that said my family, and I wasn't in the picture. So I expect you'll understand. I'm not your family. I'm just a guest you didn't invite. And guests don't pay your mortgage." I told them they had 30 minutes to take what they could carry. Then I turned around and walked to the door. Behind me, Sloane was screaming and Roman was sobbing, and I closed the door soft, the way my father taught me. The house sold. The note cleared. And I'm telling you all this from the porch of my old place. The one with the cracked sidewalk, where Dale's coming up from Kentucky this weekend. And we're going fishing for the first time in 11 years. I took the money from the sale, every dollar of it, and I started a fund at the community college downtown, the Quill Trade Scholarship, for kids who want to learn to fix engines and frame houses and wire buildings. Kids who aren't ashamed of dirty hands. Roman's living in a rental across town now, working at a parts counter, which is honest work and more than he's ever done. He calls sometimes. I don't always pick up. But I picked up last week, and he didn't ask for money. He asked if he could bring Lily Rose by to see her grandpa. I said yes. The hardest thing I ever built in my life wasn't a business or a portfolio. It was the strength to finally say no to my own blood and mean it. Because love that just keeps paying isn't love. It's rent. And I was done renting a place in my own family's life. If any of this hit home for you, leave a like and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to stop catching someone so they'd finally learn to stand? I keep coming back to that sign Lily Rose held up in the photo. The one that spelled out Emmy family in a 6-year-old's careful printing, and how I wasn't anywhere in it. For a long time, I blamed Roman and Sloan for that. But the honest truth is that I built that moment myself, one check at a time, over 30 years. Every time I paid a bill they should have paid. Every time I solved a problem they should have sweated through. I was teaching my son a lesson, just not the one I meant to teach. I was teaching him that consequences were something other people had. That's the first thing I'd want any father to sit with. What you fund, you grow. I funded comfort. And I grew a man who mistook his father for a faucet. The thing that finally turned it around wasn't the money, and it wasn't even the anger. It was the moment at the spoke when I made myself look at the truth instead of the story I wanted to believe. Sloan told me there were no photos. I could have let that lie comfort me. Instead, I asked Coraline to find them, and I looked at what was really there. That's a hard discipline. Looking straight at a thing that's going to hurt you and not flinching from it. I think a man's whole life turns on whether he's willing to do that. You can't fix an engine you refuse to open up. You can't fix a family that way either. But seeing clearly isn't enough on its own. Plenty of men see exactly what's wrong and do nothing, because doing something costs more than they're willing to pay. The hardest part wasn't understanding that Roman had to fall. He was standing in that doorway, hearing him call me a soft touch, and choosing not to send the money the next morning when every father bone in my body screamed to. That choice took something I didn't know I still had. It would have been so much easier to keep paying and keep pretending. Easy is how I got into the mess. Hard is the only road that got me out. Treat people right, even the ones who can't pay you back, like Coraline, who got a $40 tip because decency deserves rewarding wherever you find it. See things as they actually are, not as you wish them to be. And when you finally know what's right, have the backbone to do it, even when it breaks your heart in the doing. Those 3 things saved me. And I'm 68 years old. And I only just learned to hold all 3 at once. Roman calls now. Last week he asked to bring Lily Rose by. And he didn't ask for a dime. Maybe the bottom taught him what 30 years of my money never could. I'd like to believe that. Either way, I'm not renting my place in this family anymore. I'm just living in it.